they say the quietest woman in the room is either the most broken or the most dangerous. In Nadia Osi's case, wait, that name is taken. Let me think clearly. Here is the story. There are women who cry when they find out. There are women who scream, who throw things, who call their mothers at midnight and sob into the phone for 3 hours. And then there are women who simply go still. The kind of still that isn't peace. The kind of still that is a decision being made. Cleo Marsh was the second kind. She found out on a Wednesday. Not because she went looking, not because some well-meaning friend slid a screenshot into her DMs. She found out because her husband Reed left his laptop open on the kitchen counter while he went to take a shower, and his email was right there, glowing in the gray November morning light, and she was just refilling her coffee. The subject line read, "Can't stop thinking about last night." It was from someone named Tara Voss. Reed had worked with Tara at Pinnacle Group for 2 years. Cleo had met her exactly once, at the company Christmas party the previous December. She remembered a woman in a silver dress laughing too loudly at everything Reed said. She hadn't thought anything of it at the time. She set her coffee mug down on the counter very carefully, so it didn't make a sound. She read the email, then she read the thread below it. 4 months of emails. She didn't cry. She didn't move for a full minute. She just stood there in her kitchen in the house she and Reed had bought 3 years ago, in the suburb of Columbus, Ohio, where she had given up her job at a design firm in Pittsburgh to follow him when Pinnacle transferred him. In the life she had restructured around a man who was apparently restructuring himself around someone else. Then she closed the laptop, exactly as she had found it. She heard the shower turn off upstairs. She poured her coffee down the drain, picked up her keys, and drove to her sister's house 12 miles away. She didn't tell her sister what she had seen. She asked to borrow the spare bedroom for the afternoon. She said she had a headache. Her sister, Belle, believed her and brought her a glass of water and some ibuprofen and closed the door behind her. Cleo sat on the edge of the guest bed and stared at the wall for a long time. She was 31 years old. She had been married to Reed Marsh for 4 years. They had a mortgage. They had a joint checking account. They had a prenuptial agreement that Reed had insisted on before the wedding, citing his financial advisor's recommendation. And Cleo had signed it without a lawyer of her own because she was 27, and in love, and those two things together can make a person remarkably careless with paperwork. She thought about all of that. She thought about it very methodically, the way she used to think through client projects at the design firm, what exists, what's broken, what needs to happen, in what order. Then she picked up her phone and called her college roommate, Diane. Diane was not a therapist. Diane was a real estate attorney in Chicago who had a voice like gravel and no patience for nonsense. "I need a favor," Cleo said. "I need you to recommend a family law attorney in Columbus, the best one you know, and I need you not to ask me why yet." There was a pause. "You okay?" "Not even a little, but I'm going to be. Call me back." She had that conversation on a Wednesdays at 11:14 in the morning. What Reed came home to 4 months later was a different universe. Reed pulled into the driveway on a Thursday evening in March at 6:47 p.m. He knew the time because he checked his phone in the car, the same way he always did, the same pre-home ritual. Silence the group texts, check any missed calls, compose his face into whatever expression the evening required. He had gotten very good at that over the past 4 months. Composing his face. The porch light was on. That was normal. He unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The entryway was empty. Not tidy. Empty. The console table where they kept the mail and Cleo's spare keys was gone. The mirror above it was gone. The rug they had bought at an estate sale in Worthington 2 summers ago was gone, leaving a pale rectangle on the hardwood where the sun had never reached. Reed stood in the doorway and blinked. "Cleo?" His voice echoed in a way voices don't echo in furnished houses. He walked into the living room. The sectional sofa, the bookshelves, the television and the cabinet it sat on, the plants she had spent 2 years keeping alive. Gone. The walls were bare. The curtain rods were still there, but the curtains had been taken down, the rod brackets left like little metal brackets in white drywall. Reed walked to the kitchen. The table and chairs were gone. The small appliances were gone. The espresso machine he'd bought her for her birthday, the Dutch oven she'd gotten as a wedding gift, the wooden knife block. The pantry shelves had been cleaned out. The refrigerator was open, unplugged and empty. The door propped ajar with a folded piece of paper. He picked up the paper. It was a printed copy of his email thread with Tara Voss. All of it. Every message, 4 months, 37 pages, stapled in the upper left corner. Clipped to the front page was a handwritten note in Cleo's handwriting, which was small and precise and looked nothing like panic. "To movers were very professional. I tipped them well. The house is listed as of this morning. The agent's contact is on the back of this page if you have questions. My attorney's contact is also there. yours will need to get in touch with mine. I didn't take anything that wasn't mine to take. I left your clothes, your golf clubs and the protein powder. I figured that covered it. Don't call me. I've changed the number. Reed turned the page over. Both contacts were there, printed cleanly. He stared at the name of her attorney. Helen Cower, family law, 17 years of practice. A woman whose name he vaguely recognized, because she had appeared in the Columbus Dispatch once in connection with a high-profile divorce case that had not gone well for the husband. He called Cleo's number anyway. A message told him the number had been disconnected. He called her sister Belle. Belle picked up on the second ring, and there was something in the first half-second of her silence that told him she had been waiting for this call. "Where is she?" Reed asked. "She's safe," Belle said. "That's all I can tell you." "Belle, this is insane. She took everything. She can't just." "She didn't take anything that wasn't hers, Reed." Belle's voice was calm in a way that reminded him of Cleo's note, the same quality of decision already made. "You should call a lawyer. Have a good night." She hung up. Reed stood in the middle of the empty kitchen in the echo of his own breathing and tried to understand what had just happened to him. To understand how a woman empties a house in a single day while her husband goes to work and comes home, thinking everything is fine, you have to understand Cleo Marsh. Cleo had not always been the woman who went still. She had been, for most of her life, the kind of person who processed things out loud, who called her sister when she was upset, who cried at movies, who once spent 45 minutes on the phone with Diane talking through whether to accept a job offer. She was not calculating by nature. She became calculating by necessity. The 4 months between finding the emails and leaving were the longest sustained performance of her life. She came home that Wednesday evening and made dinner and asked Reed about his day and laughed at something he said. And she doesn't remember what it was. She cleared the dishes and went to bed at 10 and lay in the dark next to him and breathed in and out. And when he fell asleep, she stared at the ceiling and made a list in her head. The prenuptial agreement had been Reed's. She had signed it without reading it closely enough, and she had spent 4 months regretting that particular act of faith. But Helen Cower, the attorney Diane had referred her to, had read it very closely indeed. "It's enforceable," Helen had said at their first sitting across a conference table and holding a copy of the agreement as though she'd read worse. "Most of it. But there are 2 things here that matter to you. The first, Cleo had brought a portfolio of client work and a professional reputation into the marriage. She had given up a senior design position in Pittsburgh to follow Reed to Columbus. Under Ohio's equitable distribution statutes, that sacrifice, the career interruption, the professional cost, was a factor the court would weigh. It wasn't nothing. The second, the house. The down payment on the house had come from a combination of sources. Reed's was larger. But Cleo's inheritance from her grandmother, $38,000, which she had carried in a savings account for 3 years before the marriage, had gone into that down payment. That money was traceable. It was hers before the marriage. It remained hers under the agreement's terms, and Reed had not thought carefully enough about that when he had the agreement written. He thought the prenup protected everything he had, Helen said. It protects his business interests and his investment accounts. It doesn't protect equity she contributed from premarital assets. And it doesn't account for the career opportunity cost. Cleo had nodded slowly. "What does that mean in practical terms?" Helen had given her a measured look. "It means if we do this right, you're not walking away with nothing." They spent the next 3 months doing it right. Cleo liquidated her personal savings account. The one she had maintained separately, the one Reed knew about but had never scrutinized, because he believed the prenup made her financial autonomy irrelevant to him. She moved the funds into an account Helen's office helped her establish. She identified and documented every piece of furniture, every appliance, every object in the house that she had purchased or received as a gift before the marriage, or with her own salary during the marriage. She had the records. She had always been meticulous about money. It was one of the things Reed had occasionally teased her about. She scheduled the movers for a Thursday, the one day of Reed's week, when he had back-to-back external meetings, from 9 in the morning until 5:30. She had been planning the exit the same way she used to plan design projects, systematically, without sentimentality, with a clear picture of what the finished thing was supposed to look like. She had told only 2 people, Diane and Belle. Belle had driven up from Cincinnati 2 weeks before and walked through the house with her, quiet and tight-jawed, helping her tag everything with small color-coded stickers on the underside of items, green for hers, red for his, yellow for jointly purchased. They had done it over a Saturday afternoon while Reed played golf. When the movers arrived on that Thursday morning, Cleo had a spreadsheet. The movers had never worked from a spreadsheet before, but they adapted. By 4 in the afternoon, Her things were in a storage unit 20 miles away under a name that was not Marsh. She listed the house through an agent Helen had referred her to, a woman named Dorothy who did not ask unnecessary questions and had a buyer under contract within 72 hours of listing. Cash offer, fast close, motivated purchaser. At 5:15 p.m., Cleo drove away from the house for the last time. She had a bag in the back seat, a cashier's check in her purse, and a reservation at a hotel in Dublin, Ohio, where she had stayed once for a work conference 3 years ago and had remembered thinking it was very quiet. She checked in, ordered room service, and went to sleep before 9. She did not dream about Reed. The next 3 weeks were what Reed later described to people as the worst period of his life, which was its own kind of irony, given that he had authored the conditions that produced it. The house sold in 11 days. The proceeds were split according to the mortgage payoff and the documented equity contributions Helen's team had spent 3 months building a case for. Cleo's grandmother's $38,000, plus accrued interest, plus the court's acknowledgement of career opportunity cost, added up to a number Reed had not expected. Not catastrophic for him, but meaningfully less catastrophic for her than the prenup had been designed to ensure. He tried to contest it. His attorney, a man named Ferris who had written the prenuptial agreement in the first place and was perhaps not ideally positioned to defend its limitations, filed 2 motions. Both were denied. Reed called Belle again. He called Cleo's mother. He sent 3 emails to the address Cleo had not yet shut down, each one cycling through a different emotional register. Reasonable, apologetic, then accusatory. Cleo did not respond to any of them. He showed up at Belle's house in Cincinnati on a Sunday morning, unannounced. He stood on the porch in a jacket that was too light for the weather, and looked at Belle through the screen door with the expression of a man who had always previously been able to talk his way out of situations. Belle stood inside the screen door with her arms crossed. "She's not here," Belle said. "I know she's not here. I want to know where she is." "I know you do." "Belle, we're still married. Technically. The divorce isn't final. Technically," Belle said. "She's also changed her phone number and retained an attorney, which are fairly clear signals about what she wants, don't you think?" Reed pressed his hand flat against the doorframe. "I made a mistake." "You made 4 months of mistakes," Belle said. Her voice didn't change volume or temperature. "Consistently. Multiple times a week, from what I understand." "That's not a mistake, Reed. That's a choice you kept making." He stared at her. "She had no right to take everything. She took what was hers." Belle tilted her head slightly. "I'm going to close the door now. My attorney says I don't have to talk to you, and honestly I was only doing it out of politeness." "Goodbye, Reed." The door closed. The lock clicked. He stood on the porch for another moment, then walked back to his car. Cleo had moved to a furnished apartment in Short North, the neighborhood in Columbus she had always liked and never lived in, because it was too urban for Reed's preference for the suburbs. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building with a rooftop and a dog park and a coffee shop on the ground floor that made a very good cortado. She was working again. Helen had connected her with a small firm, 2 architects and a designer, that had been looking for contract work, and Cleo had spent the first month reminding herself that she was actually good at this. That she had been good at it before she had reorganized her professional life around someone else's geography. It came back faster than she had expected. She had been in the apartment for 6 weeks when Diane came to visit. They sat on the rooftop with glasses of wine in the cold and Diane said, "I need to ask you something and you can tell me to shut up if you want. Go ahead, do you miss him?" Cleo considered this seriously, the way she considered most things now. "I miss the version of him I thought I married. I don't miss the actual version." She looked out at the city. "I spent 4 years making space for him. I moved cities for him. I adjusted everything around what he wanted and he used all that space I gave him to fit someone else in." She shook her head. "I don't miss him. I'm angry I didn't read the paperwork more carefully." Diane laughed, which was the right response. "Got you a decent number though. Helen's a genius." Cleo smiled. "You were right about her. I'm always right. You've known me since 2011, you should have internalized this by now." Cleo laughed, and it was a real laugh, which surprised her a little. The final divorce decree came through on a Friday in May, 9 months after that Wednesday in November when she had stood in her kitchen and read an email she wasn't supposed to read. She was at work when it came through on her phone, a notification from Helen's office, and then a forwarded document. She read it at her desk and then she put her phone face down and went back to what she was doing, which was reviewing color specifications for a residential project in Bexley. Her colleague, a man named Otto who was in his 50s and said very little but noticed a great deal, looked up from his monitor. "Good news or bad news?" "Closure," Cleo said. Otto considered this. "That can be both." "It can," she agreed. this time it's just good. She called Helen after work and thanked her. She called Diane. She called Belle and they talked for 40 minutes about nothing in particular. And then Belle said, "I'm proud of you, you know. I was scared for you, those first few weeks. You were so controlled. I didn't know if you were holding yourself together or shutting down. I wasn't sure either," Cleo admitted. "What was going through your head when you found out that first day?" Cleo thought about the kitchen, the laptop, the gray November light, the way she had set the coffee mug down without making a sound. "I kept thinking," she said slowly, "about how I had arranged my entire life around someone who was arranging his around someone else. And I just kept thinking, everything I set down for him, I can pick back up. The job, the city, the version of myself I had on hold. I can just pick it up again." She paused. "And then I thought, but first I'm going to make sure I get what I'm owed." Belle was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Good." What Reed had understood too late. And what Cleo had understood in the guest bedroom at Belle's house on that first Wednesday, sitting on the edge of the bed and staring at the wall, was that the most dangerous moment in any betrayal is not the moment of discovery. It's the silence afterward. The silence where the other person is still talking, still performing normal, still coming home and eating dinner and going to sleep, while you are already somewhere else entirely, planning the geometry of what comes next. Cleo had spent 4 months in that silence. She had spent 4 months being the woman Reed thought she was, agreeable, undemanding, vaguely passive about money, while simultaneously being the woman she actually was, organized, methodical, unwilling to leave without what she was owed. Tara Voss, for what it's worth, stopped returning Reed's messages about 6 weeks after the house sold. Reed later heard through a mutual acquaintance that Tara had transferred internally to a different division. He did not hear this from Cleo. He did not hear much of anything from Cleo, because Cleo had changed her number and her attorney had made it very clear what the boundaries of acceptable contact were. Some people thought it was extreme. One of Reed's friends apparently said she had gone scorched earth, which Cleo found interesting when Belle told her about it, because scorched earth implied burning something down. Cleo hadn't burned anything. She had simply removed herself, surgically and completely, from a situation that was no longer working. She had taken what was hers and left. There's a difference between burning something down and declining to maintain it. Cleo understood that difference. She was designing again. She was living in the city she had wanted to live in. She was having dinner with Diane on the last Saturday of every month and calling Belle on Sunday evenings and going to a pottery class on Tuesday nights that she had signed up for on impulse and turned out to genuinely enjoy. She was, in a way she had not been in years, exactly where she was supposed to be. There is a version of this story where the lesson is about revenge. About a wronged woman outmaneuvering a dishonest man and walking away with the win. That version is satisfying and it has its place and there is nothing wrong with finding it satisfying. But the version Cleo would tell you, if you asked her, which she doesn't particularly want you to do, because she has moved on, is a little different. The lesson isn't about what she took from Reed. It's about what she had put down for him, without noticing, over 4 years, piece by piece. The career, the city, the apartment in the neighborhood she actually liked, the version of herself that didn't have to schedule her life around someone else's preferences. She put all of it down, and then she picked it back up. That's the whole story. The rest is just paperwork.